Night falls over Newport, Rhode Island. The Atlantic air is heavy with salt, and the sound of waves drifts up from the cliffs below. Set back from Bellevue Avenue, a white palace rises out of the darkness, cold, luminous, and immovable. Marble House does not glow with warmth. It reflects light the way stone does, hard, flawless, and indifferent. This is not a home built for comfort. It is a monument. And like many monuments, it was designed to say something very specific about power. Marble House was completed in 1892 as a birthday gift. Not a token of affection, not a quiet gesture, but a public declaration. William Kissam Vanderbilt, heir to one of the greatest fortunes in American history, spent an estimated $11 million to build it for his wife Alva. $7 million of that went into marble alone, more than 500,000 cubic feet shipped from Italy, France, and North Africa. The message was unmistakable. The Vanderbilts were no longer merely rich. They were untouchable. Newport was already crowded with summer cottages, though cottage was a polite fiction. Families like the Astors and the Belmonts had claimed the coastline, erecting palatial homes to display their wealth during the social season. But Alva Vanderbilt wanted something different. Bigger, whiter, heavier. A house that could not be ignored or outshone. Marble House was built not to blend in, but to dominate. From the outside, it resembles a European palace transplanted onto American soil. Corinthian columns. Symmetry so precise it feels severe. No softness, no hint of domestic life. Inside, the effect is even more overwhelming. Gold leaf coats the ceilings. Walls echo with emptiness. Every surface announces cost. Nothing suggests intimacy. Yet behind the marble and gold, something is already wrong. The house was finished just as the Vanderbilt marriage began to fracture. What was meant to celebrate status would soon become a stage for control, resentment, and quiet rebellion. Marble House would host balls that rewrote America's social hierarchy, but it would also witness a marriage collapsing under the weight of ambition and expectation. This mansion was not built to shelter a family. It was built to project dominance, to freeze a moment in time when money could still pretend to be destiny. And from the moment the first guest walked through its doors, Marble House began doing what it would always do best: hide human conflict behind flawless stone. The story of Marble House is not about architecture alone. It is about what happens when power is poured into walls, when personal unhappiness is disguised as grandeur, and when a home becomes a weapon in a much larger social war. To understand why Marble House exists, you have to understand Alva Vanderbilt, not as a wife, not as a hostess, but as a strategist. In the rigid hierarchy of Gilded Age society, money alone was not enough. New fortunes like the Vanderbilts were still viewed as outsiders by old New York families who traced their lineage back generations. Alva did not intend to wait for acceptance. She planned to force it. William Kissam Vanderbilt had inherited wealth on a scale that was difficult to comprehend. His grandfather, Cornelius Vanderbilt, had built the family fortune through shipping and railroads, industries that powered America's rise but carried a social stigma. Old money families tolerated the wealth while quietly resenting the people who earned it. William was cautious, reserved, and often content to let his money speak for itself. Alva was not. She believed architecture could do what invitations could not. A house, if built on the right scale, could command respect. It could intimidate rivals, silence critics, and announce permanence. Marble House was conceived as a challenge to Newport's elite. Not a summer retreat, but a throne room. The location mattered. Bellevue Avenue was becoming the most competitive stretch of real estate in America, lined with estates designed to impress one another in an escalating arms race of luxury. Alva selected a site that allowed Marble House to face the ocean, ensuring it would be visible, monumental, impossible to overlook. The house would not just exist among Newport's mansions. It would preside over them. William agreed, though not with enthusiasm. The project ballooned quickly, far beyond its original scope. Alva involved herself in every decision, pushing for imported materials, European craftsmen, and design elements that mimicked the palaces of Versailles and the Petit Trianon. This was not imitation out of admiration. It was appropriation. If American wealth was dismissed as crude, she would dress it in European refinement until no one could question it. Construction took years and required an army of laborers, artisans, and designers. Marble arrived in massive shipments, each slab carefully selected. Gold leaf was applied by hand. Rooms were designed not for daily use but for spectacle. Everything served a single purpose: to establish the Vanderbilts as cultural equals, not just financial ones. But beneath the ambition, cracks were forming. William's tolerance for the project waned as costs rose and emotional distance grew. The mansion was becoming Alva's creation more than theirs. Marble House was meant to secure their place in society, yet it was already redefining the power balance inside their marriage. What emerged was not simply a home, but a declaration of will. Marble House was built to win a social war, and Alva intended to use it relentlessly. When Marble House opened for its first season, daily life inside it followed a rhythm that felt both meticulously planned and strangely hollow. This was not a household that adapted to its occupants. The occupants adapted to the house. Every movement, every meal, every social interaction was shaped by the demands of spectacle. Mornings began quietly. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, reflecting off marble floors and gilded ceilings, amplifying even the smallest sounds. Servants moved carefully, their footsteps echoing through vast rooms that were often unoccupied. The scale of the mansion made ordinary activities feel ceremonial. A walk down the hallway felt like crossing a public space, not moving through a private home. William Vanderbilt spent much of his time away, traveling or retreating into business and personal interests that increasingly excluded his wife. When he was present, his routines were restrained. He favored private rooms, limited company, and a quieter pace. Marble House offered little of that. Its grand salons and formal dining rooms existed for performance, not rest. Alva thrived in that environment. She treated the mansion as a stage, carefully orchestrating its use. Afternoons were devoted to planning dinners, receptions, and balls that would define the Newport season. Invitations were currency. Seating arrangements were political documents. Who stood near whom, who entered which room first, who was acknowledged publicly. All of it mattered. Evenings transformed the house. Chandeliers blazed to life. Music echoed through marble corridors. Guests moved through rooms designed to overwhelm them, each space more opulent than the last. The house did exactly what Alva intended. It impressed, intimidated, and exhausted its visitors. Marble House became unavoidable. Behind the scenes, the cost of this life was measured in exhaustion and distance. Dozens of staff worked long hours to maintain the illusion of effortless luxury. Privacy was rare. Silence was temporary. The house demanded constant attention, constant upkeep, constant use. For Alva, Marble House was both a triumph and a refuge. Within its walls, she held authority that extended beyond her marriage. She controlled the guest lists, the tone of the season, and the social fates of those who attended. For William, the house became a symbol of estrangement. He lived inside a structure that reflected his wealth, but not his temperament. Their marriage began to fracture more visibly as the years passed. The mansion magnified every difference between them. Where Alva sought influence, William sought escape. Where she embraced the public eye, he retreated from it. Marble House, designed to project unity and power, quietly revealed the opposite. It was a place of grandeur built on imbalance, a home where appearances mattered more than harmony. And as the social season grew louder, the personal silence between its owners deepened. By the mid-1890s, the brilliance of Marble House could no longer fully conceal the strain beneath its surfaces. The Vanderbilt marriage, once presented as a partnership of wealth and ambition, had hardened into something colder and more transactional. William and Alva lived under the same roof, but rarely in the same emotional world. The house did not bring them together. It amplified the distance. William grew increasingly resentful of the demands Marble House imposed. The cost of maintaining such a vast and rigidly formal estate was enormous, not only financially but psychologically. He was expected to perform a role that did not suit him, the ever-present patriarch presiding over lavish gatherings he neither planned nor enjoyed. The mansion required constant display, and William had little appetite for display of any kind. Alva, meanwhile, pushed forward with undiminished intensity. If the marriage was failing, she would not allow society to see it. Marble House became her armor. Within its walls, she exercised control over social narratives, ensuring that the Vanderbilts remained central to Newport life. To be excluded from Marble House was to be irrelevant. Yet control came at a cost. Alva's expectations extended beyond her husband to her children, particularly her daughter, Consuelo. From an early age, Consuelo was raised not for personal fulfillment, but for strategic advantage. Marble House was her training ground, a place where she learned how posture, silence, and obedience could be tools of survival. The pressure was relentless. Consuelo was expected to marry well, not for love, but to cement the Vanderbilt family's position among Europe's aristocracy. Alva orchestrated introductions, monitored correspondence, and made it clear that personal desire had no place in the equation. Marble House, with its grand rooms and watchful atmosphere, became a place where resistance felt impossible. Behind closed doors, arguments escalated. William withdrew further. Alva hardened. The mansion absorbed their conflict without revealing it to guests. Walls thick with marble held secrets as easily as they held sound. To the outside world, the Vanderbilts remained powerful and enviable. Inside, the household was increasingly divided. By the end of the decade, the strain could no longer be managed through ritual alone. The marriage was approaching its breaking point. Marble House, once intended as a symbol of shared dominance, had become a battleground. Its beauty remained flawless, but the life inside it was fraying. The pressure beneath the gilding was no longer invisible. It was shaping decisions that would permanently alter the fate of the family and redefine what Marble House would represent in the years to come. The breaking point came quietly, without spectacle. In 1805, after years of tension, William and Alva Vanderbilt divorced. In an era when divorce was still a social scandal, especially among the elite, the separation sent shockwaves through Newport and New York society. Yet Alva did not retreat. She emerged from the marriage with something extraordinary for a woman of her time: control. Alva kept Marble House. The mansion that had once symbolized her marriage now became a declaration of independence. William retained much of his wealth, but Alva secured the house, along with a settlement that ensured her financial autonomy. Marble House, stripped of its original purpose, was reborn as her domain. With that control came transformation. Alva no longer needed to maintain the illusion of marital unity. She reshaped Marble House according to her own priorities. The social rituals remained, but their meaning shifted. The mansion was no longer about asserting the Vanderbilt name through a couple. It was about Alva asserting herself. Her most radical act came not in architecture, but in ideology. In the early 20th century, Alva embraced the women's suffrage movement, aligning herself with a cause that challenged the very power structures she had once worked so hard to master. Marble House, previously a stage for elite excess, became a venue for political action. In 1914, Alva hosted a women's suffrage rally on the lawn, drawing national attention. It was a stunning contradiction. The same house built to enforce social hierarchy now hosted calls to dismantle it. Yet Alva's control did not soften her expectations of her children. Consuelo's marriage to the Duke of Marlborough had already taken place under immense pressure, a union forged for status rather than affection. Consuelo would later describe the experience as emotionally devastating. Marble House, where the plans were formed, remained a painful reminder of how personal sacrifice had been demanded in the name of legacy. As Alva aged, her relationship with Marble House grew more complex. It was both a symbol of her power and a monument to the choices she could not undo. She had won independence in a world that rarely allowed it, but she had achieved it through the same mechanisms of control she later criticized. Eventually, Alva moved on. In 1932, she sold Marble House, closing her chapter in its story. The mansion she had once wielded as a weapon and a platform was left behind, its rooms still heavy with ambition, conflict, and unresolved cost. Marble House had survived its creators, but it would never forget them. After Alva Vanderbilt sold Marble House in 1932, the mansion entered a quieter, more uncertain phase of its existence. The world that had created it, the Gilded Age culture of excess, rigid hierarchy, and social warfare, was fading. The Great Depression had reshaped public attitudes toward wealth, and homes like Marble House no longer symbolized aspiration. They represented imbalance. Ownership passed through several hands, but none could recreate the intensity that once filled its halls. The grand salon sat largely unused. The formal dining room, designed for glittering banquets, fell silent. Marble House had been built for performance, and without an audience it felt strangely incomplete. Maintenance became a challenge. The very features that had once announced dominance, imported marble, gold leaf, vast scale, now demanded constant, expensive care. Heating enormous rooms was inefficient. Restoring delicate surfaces required specialized craftsmanship. What had once been proof of unlimited resources now exposed their limits. Culturally, the mansion drifted. The rituals that defined Newport society had dissolved. The younger generation of elites favored privacy over display, modernity over ceremony. Marble House, so perfectly tuned to its moment, struggled to adapt. It was not easily repurposed. It could not be made smaller, warmer, or more practical without losing its identity. Yet abandonment never fully claimed it. The house's sheer presence prevented that. Even empty, Marble House commanded attention. Visitors slowed as they passed. Locals spoke of it as a relic from another age, a reminder of how aggressively wealth had once been asserted. By the mid-20th century, preservationists began to see Marble House not as an obsolete burden, but as a historical artifact. Its excess became its value. The mansion was a record written in stone, a physical archive of America's flirtation with aristocracy. Efforts to preserve it gathered momentum. Restoration replaced reinvention. The goal was no longer to live inside Marble House, but to understand it. Rooms were stabilized, not personalized. History was curated rather than created. The mansion that once pulsed with ambition entered a state of suspended animation. Marble House no longer dictated social power. It waited. And in its stillness, it began telling a different story. One not about dominance or display, but about how quickly eras end and how difficult it is to let their monuments go. The palace remained, but the world it ruled had vanished. Marble House's transformation into a public landmark marked the final reversal of its original purpose. What had once been fiercely private, aggressively exclusive, and carefully controlled was now open to strangers. The gates that once filtered society's elite began welcoming tourists, historians, and school groups. The mansion was no longer a weapon of influence. It had become an exhibit. The Preservation Society of Newport County acquired Marble House in the mid-20th century, recognizing that its excess was precisely what made it important. This was not simply a beautiful building. It was evidence, proof of how American wealth once tried to reinvent itself as aristocracy, borrowing European styles to legitimize new money on an old continent's terms. Restoration focused on accuracy rather than comfort. Rooms were returned to their Gilded Age appearance not to make them livable, but to make them legible. The gold leaf was refreshed, the marble polished, furniture placed exactly where it once stood. The goal was not to revive the Vanderbilt lifestyle, but to freeze it. Visitors walking through Marble House today often feel overwhelmed. The scale is relentless. The materials are unforgiving. There is little warmth, little softness. Guides explain that this was intentional. Marble House was designed to impress, not to nurture. It was built for short, intense encounters, not long, quiet lives. Over time, Alva Vanderbilt's role in the mansion's story has become more central to how it is interpreted. Once dismissed as domineering or eccentric, she is now recognized as one of the most formidable social architects of her era. Her later embrace of women's suffrage complicates the narrative, forcing visitors to reconcile the contradiction between extreme privilege and progressive activism. Marble House holds that contradiction without resolving it. The same lawns that once enforced hierarchy hosted speeches demanding equality. The same rooms that trained a daughter for a strategic marriage later echoed with calls for women's political autonomy. The building does not explain this tension, it preserves it. As a museum, Marble House no longer belongs to one family. It belongs to a broader historical conversation about wealth, gender, power, and ambition. Its meaning has expanded even as its function narrowed. The mansion still stands immaculate, but its authority is gone. What remains is memory, carefully maintained, meticulously curated, and quietly unsettling. Marble House endures because it refuses to be simple. It is tempting to view it only as a monument to excess, a cautionary tale carved in stone about what happens when wealth outpaces restraint. But that interpretation misses something more unsettling. Marble House was not a mistake. It was a logical outcome of its moment. In the late 19th century, America was still unsure of what its elite should look like. Old European hierarchies were rejected in theory but imitated in practice. The Vanderbilts had money, but money alone did not grant legitimacy. Marble House was built to close that gap. It was an argument made in marble and gold that wealth could manufacture permanence, dignity, and authority. For a time, it worked. The house reshaped Newport society. It forced acceptance. It elevated its owner. But it could not stabilize what it was never designed to protect. It could not preserve a marriage strained by control and resentment. It could not spare a child from being treated as an asset. And it could not adapt when the values that created it fell out of favor. Marble House reveals a deeper truth about power. When status is constructed entirely through display, it requires constant reinforcement. When that reinforcement stops, the structure remains, but its meaning collapses. The mansion survived. The social system that justified it did not. Alva Vanderbilt understood this better than most. By the end of her life, she had outgrown the very world she once fought to dominate. Her turn toward activism was not a rejection of power, but a redirection of it. Marble House became the backdrop for that evolution, a silent witness to contradiction rather than a resolution of it. Today, the mansion stands immaculate, admired, photographed, and toured. But it no longer commands obedience. It invites interpretation. Visitors are free to admire its beauty, recoil at its excess, or question the values it represents. The house no longer tells people what to think. It asks them what kind of society builds something like this and why. Marble House was never just a home. It was a statement. And like all statements rooted in ambition and insecurity, it says as much about fear as it does about power. The marble remains, the meaning has shifted, and that, more than its size or cost, is the true legacy of the house.